Dare great things for Christ. Christ calls us to dare great things. In the marketplace, as well as in the mission field, there has never been a time like the present for the spirit of the Catholic entrepreneur. Now is the time for men and women of great courage and great vision to engage our church and our culture. Now is the time to dare great things. And here is your host as we dare great things, Father Nathan Cromley, the president and founder of the St. John Institute.
When it comes to leading, something we can't avoid is that we leaders are in the limelight. Being in the limelight means that what we do and say is often measured in a worldly standard. How do we reconcile this with the importance in Christianity to be hidden, to look for the hidden things as the most important? The teaching of Christ shines out brilliantly in contrast with Robert Greene's sixth law of power. And in this fourth part of our series, I take a look at what he proposes in contrast with Christ. Hey everybody, so glad to be back with you again and continue this reading of the 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. And I admit, it's not really a reading, right? I'm just kind of picking out some of the salient features here, but it's important because it allows us to see the brilliance of Jesus. And it doesn't mean that everything, of course, that Greene is proposing here is wrong. Obviously, it's not. There's a lot that's very true. And yet that's what's so great. To see the Christian difference in leadership is really, it's at the heart of what we're doing here at the St. John Leadership Network. We're trying to bring the ideas that faith can make you a more effective leader than not. And this is kind of like a little bit, challenging. Most people say, oh my gosh, if I have faith, put God in, I'm going to get watered down. I'm going to be some loving person, right? Who walks around handing out flowers to the poor. And I'm like, well, no, we hand out food to the poor. We don't hand out flowers. But we fight for the poor. You get the point though. Like a lot of us have watered down Christianity and Christian leadership to the point where we can be tempted to think that real leadership should be defined, well, according to the world's standards. Because after all, we're in the world. I mean, if we're not making a profit, we're not in business. And to make a profit, well, you got to deal with the world in a way that the world understands. I just don't think we need to deal with the world in the way that the world demands that we deal with it. I think we have to deal with the world as Christian leaders in the way that God deals with it. And again, I think this is kind of, we're on a good side here because God made the world. He made the world, he redeemed the world, and he loved the world, right? So if we're listening to him, he's actually going to empower us to be better at what we do and not worse at it. His advice is not going to make us worse leaders. It's going to make us better leaders. It's just that it's hard for us to understand because we say, well, if I follow his advice, maybe I'll lose that competitive edge that makes me successful. And I smile at that because I'm like, no, I've met plenty of great saints who were kind of, definitely had a lot of drive to them. I wouldn't say they're necessarily competitive, but then again, there's a lot of saints that were competitive. It's true. It's just that edge doesn't define the boundaries of the ethos that drives that leader. That's the problem. It's not to be competitive isn't the problem. It's to be competitive as if that was the be all and end all, and as if that was a secret to your success. Because it's like to overlook the fact that we are in business, but we are in business for God. And we're in business with God. And we're leading organizations on his behalf. Which also means that he takes interest. If he gave us a position, and our faith, as we understand it, all authority comes down from heaven. Right? So if we have authority on earth, it was a gift from Almighty God to us. And it was a gift from Almighty God so that he could then exert his, beneficial influence through us. He could bless the world through our efforts. What a vision that is. Well, that means that I have to align myself with how he wants that to happen. And for Christians, we understand the wisdom of God as being fully manifested by the way Jesus led. And he consummated his leadership in his death on the cross. The cross is our power. The cross is our hope. But it's like, how do we reconcile that with the need that we have, to gain attention and to be known and to be seen, to market our position, to win over people, to be influential? Well, I take an example here. This is what Robert Greene says in his sixth law, in his 48 laws of power. He says that, remember, Greene's perspective is that of Machiavelli. So he's trying to say, hey, this is the way the world works. And he says, if you want to be successful, court attention at all cost. Everything, according to Green, is judged by its appearance. What is unseen counts for nothing. Never let yourself get lost in the crowd, then, or buried in oblivion. Stand out. Be conspicuous at all cost. Make yourself a magnet of attention by appearing larger, more colorful, more mysterious than the bland and timid masses. Okay, well, I mean, you can't really contest with that. There's a lot of truth in that. Even Jesus, for example, when he went into the temple in Matthew 21, for example, he goes over and he throws all of the tables, turns them. He takes a whip made of cords and drives people out of the temple. He wasn't trying to hide. When the leaders of the authorities of the day came to him and challenged him, he even said, if I tell these crowds to keep silent, the very stones will shout. Right? So there's a place for being manifest. When he was crucified on the side of the road right by the gate going into the city, where scores of people, hundreds, if not thousands of people would have walked past him to see him. It's just that, of course, what he makes visible on the cross is a man who has been punished and been rejected, who's been defiled in the eyes of the people. And yet, at the same time, there was a certain ability to be manifest. He says to the Christians that you are cities, for example, and no one builds a city except on the top of a hill, right? So that its light can be seen. You take a lamp, you put it on a lampstand. You build a city, you put it on top of the hill. Lights aren't made to be put under bushel baskets. There is a type of visibility that is, part of the Christian ethos, Christian thing where we want saints to lead. To lead means that you're out in front. You're making a difference that is visible, right? So there's an aspect to this, which of course is interesting. It's just that it's his insistence, and for Green, that this is an absolutely paramount obligation for all leadership, which I think is flawed. When he says, for example, be conspicuous at all cost, right? Or do not get lost, never get lost in the crowd or buried in oblivion. I kind of smile because, of course, he gives many examples where this law is, lived out in history. And I'm like, Robert Greene, didn't you see all of the other examples where the most powerful people actually operated in a hidden way? I'll give you an example. We think of great leaders in history, great presidents, great founders of companies. What about their parents? Where do you think that person came from? Often they came from exceptional parents who did amazing things and who reared them while being hidden and not being seen. I was moved when I listened to a speech by Tom Brady. Many people consider him to be the greatest quarterback, or he certainly is a great quarterback. And they asked him, Tom Brady, who's your hero? And he started to, show emotion as he said, my father. And it was very moving because you wouldn't have expected it. The hero of the great quarterback is a man we never even saw or understood, who doesn't stand out in the crowd. And you kind of like, well, yeah. And it's not just Tom Brady who said that. Theodore Roosevelt, his great mentor, was a woodsman from Maine who helped him to become a man and develop the inner characteristics that would one day shout out as being the president. Pope John Paul II, his mother, for example, was told to never have another child before she conceived him. She'd had bad health. The doctors warned her to not conceive another child, and yet she did. And she passed away when he was only 11 years old. And yet she gave her, and what does John Paul II have on the dresser in his personal quarters as he was Pope? But a picture of his mother, right? Who's the hero who really changed history? This woman who dared to conceive yet another child and give birth, not just to an ordinary person, but to one who would change the world. You see, so I would like to just kind of contest this. Is it really that power is defined by being noticed? And I just laugh. And I say, even history won't bear that to be true. There's obvious value in being seen. There's obvious importance to marketing and to branding and to catching the attention of people. It's just that, is this really the type of power that defines human greatness? And I chuckle because no. The real power that defines human greatness is in the hidden things, the small things, the things people don't notice that really change the world because it exists as the foundation for all greatness.
Would you like to hear more from Father Nathan? Join the St. John Leadership Network and receive a 2-minute glance at the gospel every Sunday morning right to your phone. To learn more, go to www.stjohnleadershipnetwork.org/member and join for free today.
So Robert Greene wrote this very persuasive book. It's called The 48 Laws of Power. And his sixth law says that we should court attention at all cost. And I want to, of course, there's value in this. He says everything is judged by its appearance. What is unseen counts for nothing. And this is so different from the way that Jesus lived. Because yes, Jesus certainly was manifest. But remember that he was manifest for 3 years and 30 years he lived in hidden life. He spent 10 times more time in a simple life there in Nazareth. If you don't count the Egypt thing and where he was born, but the majority of his life was lived being absolutely inconspicuous, lost in the crowd of not even coming from a prominent city. Remember, they made fun of him. Can anything good come from Nazareth? And when his apostles, who, by the way, would change the course of history, when his apostles were accused as being his followers, they made fun of their accents, saying, oh, you come from Galilee, right? Because we can tell by your accent, meaning that you're not someone who is in the courts of power. And they were saying that to Simon Peter, who would be the first pope of a church that has the longest history of any institution in the history of the world. The longest organized institution began by this person who was inconspicuous, who was not noticed. Why? It's because, yes, there's a certain visibility that then happens at Pentecost, etc. But the real power of the person doesn't come from their position. It comes from their soul. It comes from character. It comes from who you are. And that's the brilliance of Jesus. He's like, yes, one day maybe you'll stand before kings and testify on behalf of me. Fine. Maybe one day I'll ask you to go into the crowds and the masses like St. Francis Xavier and baptize 100,000 people. Fine. But I'm not asking you to do that as if that's the definition of your success. I'm asking you to do that to witness and to testify to the beauty of the power of my grace that I've given you in the hidden recesses of your heart. And if you don't have my grace in the hidden recesses of your heart, then you're just faking power. Because yeah, you might have power in the eyes of the world, but your power will be empty because it won't serve the deeper healing and the deeper plan that Almighty God himself has. Who is more powerful? Someone who serves the plan of God and who lets God reign, the infinite God reign in the world? Or someone who has a little plan and for a little moment in time, like Shakespeare says, dances on the stage of history, It's like, I'm not quite sure that there's not even a comparison between the two. There are many, many powerful people who are gone and lost in the oblivion that Greene so apparently fears here in the sixth law. He fears being lost in oblivion. Well, that's exactly what's going to happen to you. I remember one time a speaker made a funny kind of comment. He said, who was the wealthiest and most powerful man in Assisi in the 1200s? And of course, everyone was like, who had the most money in the town of Assisi in the 1200s? And everyone's like looking around because no one knows. And he's like, exactly. But you know who history remembers and who every front yard, has a statue of, and the most popular saint in the history of the Catholic Church was the poorest, most, forsaken. He a man who walked around in cloth rags and lived, he was praying in caves, St. Francis of Assisi. Everyone remembers St. Francis, but because of who he was, you see? Now, who had more power? And besides that, whose power lasted? Well, the power of the man who followed God. That's what, it's really a temptation for us. And it's a temptation because there's something true about it. If we want to make a difference, then we try to rise in the courts of the world. And I applaud that. Even Pope John Paul II, he was in the public courts. I mean, he was the Pope. I remember Billy Graham making the comment about John Paul II. He said, that's a Pope who knows how to Pope. And he would gather, the largest gathering of humanity in the history of the world happened with Pope John Paul II in the Philippines. 5 million people came to see him and attend Holy Mass that he offered. I mean, so yeah, he definitely rose. But you see, that wasn't what defined him. And that's the Christian difference of a Christian leader. And I think about this. I give you the example of parents and the way that they're hidden. I think of also the example of think of St. Paul. There's a saint who stood out, right? He definitely sought attention and got it. And yet, who was it that allowed St. Paul to first get his footing as an apostle? It was St. Barnabas. I say many people don't even consider, who is Barnabas? We kind of forgot about him. Yeah, Barnabas was the one who opened the doorway by bringing Paul to meet the other apostles after Paul had had his conversion, and the Christians who were in Jerusalem were afraid to receive him because he was the one who had persecuted them. So they were turning their back on Paul. Paul almost was lost in irrelevance. He was not given a seat where he could then make an impact in the world unless and except for a hidden guy named St. Barnabas. And yet St. Barnabas's hidden thing, without anyone even noticing it, most of history has forgotten it, changed the course of history. This is court attention at all costs might actually be dangerous. Because if we do that, and we court attention at all costs, and we make ourselves, as Green says, a magnet of attention by appearing larger, more colorful, more mysterious than the bland and timid masses, well, if we do that, we might actually make ourselves much weaker. Because in the end, Aristotle has this amazing insight when it comes to power. He says, the funny thing about power is that it can only be bestowed upon you by other people, which means actually it's extremely weak. The moment the opinion of other people changes, you lose the power that they gave you. And the public opinion is known to change rather rapidly. As soon as you are in favor, you're glorified, but as soon as you lose favor, everything crashes, which means it's really, he says, a very weak thing compared, as he contrasts it with happiness. And he defines happiness as this activity that you possess within yourself in a hidden area, a hidden part of your life, which is a contemplation of God and your ability to be a good friend. It's a really amazing insight. And that came from a pagan 400 years before Christ. He himself would look at this and say, is this really it? And how important this is for us to embody that in our culture today, where with the social media thing, everyone wants to be visible, wants to share everything. And yet, if we spend all of our time sharing small things, we can forget the grandeur of the deep down decisions and principles that make a person real. Truth, fidelity, things you can't see, things that you can only manifest. And this is the difference for a Christian leader. We as Christian leaders need, of course, to be visible. We need, of course, to be good communicators. We need to be out there doing things. And yes, therefore, we have to, demarcate ourselves. What's the unique value proposition that we're trying to sell? And we need to drive that home, and we need to, fill the marketplace. Yeah, that's all fine, and dandy. There's nothing wrong with that. But we do it because we're manifesting a conviction inside of ourselves that what we're doing has value. And that conviction of it being that is an alignment between the inner of our souls and the objective truth about God. If we're out of that alignment, I don't want you to court attention at all costs. I don't want you to be seen. If what you're doing isn't of value, if what you're doing isn't objectively good, I don't think you should be out there selling it. Honestly, what are you doing? I've got a cheap product that's going to actually, fail and along the way, and I'm just doing it for money. So therefore, I'm going to, follow Green's law of power and get everyone to notice me. I'm like, you're doing a detriment to humanity and to yourself. But if on the contrary, you start with that proposition of what I do is good, what I'm offering is of value, well, that's a hidden power that then we manifest through the power of human attention to the degree that we can. But we're also able as Christians to realize that the true victory isn't dependent upon whether or not people notice us, because the one that we follow hung upon a cross of human shame and rejection, and yet that was the high point of any human achievement. It was found, paradoxically, in the defeat of the cross.
Would you like to start your Thursday mornings with a scriptural leadership lesson? Join the St. John Leadership Network, where Father Nathan hosts a 30-minute call at 6:30 a.m. in all 4 U.S. time zones. To learn more, go to www.stjohnleadershipnetwork.org/member and join for free today.
One time I've had the joy as a Catholic priest of getting to know a lot of different people. And so I've had the real privilege of getting to know contemplative nuns. And I know not all of you are Catholics. You might not be familiar with what a cloistered nun is, but it's basically a woman or a man, there could be monks at the same time, who set themselves on the outside of society. They're not seen, they're not known, they're not heard. They kind of forsake all public attention in order to live an inner spiritual intensity of being dedicated to God with him as their sole reference point. And I remember one time I was in one of the northernmost cities. I think it's the second northernmost city in all of Europe. It's called Tromsø, Norway, 176 miles north of the Arctic Circle. Okay, so this was a spot where just very few human beings ever go. And there's a city up there, made of stout souls who endure the cold and the darkness on a regular basis. And there I was leading a group of young men on a hike. And so we were there and we looked for, is there a Catholic church in the area? Because of course I'm a priest, so we could find lodging, and we found one. And this place really struck me, and it sticks with me as one of the most powerful experiences I've ever had. It was an experience of 13 cloistered Carmelite sisters. And these sisters had left their native Poland, 12 of them. There was one Norwegian in their midst. 12 of them had left Poland in the comforts of their home and their own culture and their own land to go into this dark and very cold location in the Arctic Circle. And there they live every day, a rhythm of prayer where they probably pray 5-6 hours a day. Prayer and work, fraternal charity, all behind walls that no one even sees them. And I got to meet and visit with these sisters and talk with them, and they were so delightful. The smiles, the joys of these sisters. And I asked them, why are you there? Why did you go to Norway when you could have stayed in Poland? And the sister smiles, and she said, we wanted to make sure that God would be known and loved in the Arctic. And so we came here to know and love him there in the Arctic, so that here he would be glorified. It really shook me, right? It shook me a lot more than listening to some sales guy make a pitch on social media, right? Because I thought, here, there's real dedication. I mean, this is where they were going to die in Norway, be buried in Norway, apart from their families, apart from their world, because there was something in them. There was a love in them that was so intense that they wanted to give it all to God and burn for him alone. And so no one even knows about them or sees them. All you see is the walls. I got to meet these people, and they changed my life. I was with another group of cloistered nuns in Toledo, Ohio, the Sisters of the Visitation. Amazing cloistered sisters, and no one knows about them. They live a life hidden there. And I asked them, what's the value of your life? Because, reading these Laws of Power with Robert Greene, you would think, oh my goodness, they've totally, been relegated to the side. These women are wasting their lives. They're not being powerful at all. And I remember Mother Superior smiling, and she said, every great building needs a foundation. You don't see the foundation of great buildings, but the taller the building, the deeper the foundation. Our role is to provide that foundation for the church, to, in a hidden way, like the foundation of a building, below anyone's eyesight, to provide that strength of the faith that we try to live for God, so that then the others in the church can make that manifest by their works. What an amazing concept. It's so different, right? And when you realize the martyrs that have come out of these cloistered communities, when the state tries to silence them, there's a very famous book written called The Song from the Scaffold, and it's about the Carmelites who were put to death, the Carmelite nuns who were put to death by the state, during the French Revolution. And the sisters would go one by one, and they were all singing. They were put to death singing, like they were not broken. And I look at that and I'm like, well, according to Law 6, if no one pays attention to you, you're worthless. And I'm just like, that's a very weak position. I mean, I'm sorry, but that is not a position of strength. If your greatness depends on whether or not other people like you, I'd like to introduce you to Jesus Christ, right? Because I'd like to introduce you to somebody who went all the way to his death, confident in the victory that he saw and knew in God. And I like to say that man was powerful. That man who was rejected by the world changed the world. He was the stone that was the thrown out by the builders that became the cornerstone for the world that we live in and the philosophy that we teach, a philosophy that's changed the course of history. And yet he wasn't someone who tried to court attention at all costs, courting attention. And so, I think this goes to the heart of one of my criticisms here of Green. And I think much of what he says is true. And even there's a part in the sixth law which we really should pay attention to because it's part of our leadership. I just want to remind you, though, that as Christians, we have something greater, right? We have something greater. We have the law from Christ that says that the Heavenly Father sees what is done in secret and pays us accordingly to what's done in secret. The God who knows the human heart and who sees all things and values all things. I would like to court his attention at all costs, And how do I court his attention? By taking care of the downcast, the forgotten, the poor of this world. Whatever you do to the least of my brothers, that you do unto me, he says. Now, is it a contradiction? No, it's a both and. Living with that law of love that Christ gives us, and that example that values the hidden and that esteems the hidden as the absolutely most important part of what we do. Again, if your character is empty, then your leadership is vain. Okay? So the most important thing you need to do is build up who you are in God, right? But then having that spirit, then make that manifest. Now, even Jesus says, men will see the good that you do and give glory to your Father who's in heaven. So yeah, we shouldn't run away from attention. It's just that we shouldn't court it at all costs. My goodness, no. Well, then we should court at all costs of the love of Jesus Christ on the cross. And being that, then let God take care of the rest. He will make us known to the degree he wants as we serve him with the fidelity that changes the world, the inner faith and the solidity of a character that Jesus Christ has forged in the fires of the cross. This is something that shakes the very foundations of the world and shows us the real meaning and the real way to live out this sixth law from Green.
Dare great things for Christ.
Share your feedback with Father Nathan. Send us an email at communications@stjohninstitute.org. That's communications@stjohninstitute.org. And visit www.stjohninstitute.org and sign up for our newsletter to receive updates from Father Nathan.